My name is Matt, and I am 68 years old. After building a successful furniture manufacturing company from the ground up, I thought my golden years would be peaceful. Then my wife Sarah passed away 3 years ago, leaving me alone with my memories and a fortune that suddenly seemed to interest my son and his wife a lot more than I did. But they never counted on my 12-year-old granddaughter, Emily. "Grandpa, tonight, they plan to steal your fortune," she whispered to me yesterday. I pretended to sleep when midnight came. If you are watching this video right now, let me know where you are tuning in from. Hit that like and subscribe button if you want to find out how these money-hungry relatives walked straight into a trap they never saw coming. I grew up in a small town in rural Pennsylvania, the son of a factory worker and a seamstress. My parents worked hard, but we always just barely got by. From an early age, I learned the value of hard work and determination. I watched my father come home with calloused hands, and my mother sewing late into the night to put food on our table. They taught me that nothing in life comes easy, but honest work builds character. After high school, I took odd jobs to save money for community college classes in business. During the day, I worked at a local furniture store delivering and assembling pieces for customers. At night, I studied. The owner, Mr. Jenkins, noticed my interest in the craftsmanship of the furniture we sold and started teaching me about wood-quality joinery techniques and design principles. By my mid-20s, I had saved enough to rent a small workshop where I started crafting custom tables on weekends. I still remember the first dining table I sold to a local doctor for $300. It took me 2 weeks to build, and I probably made less than minimum wage on it, but the pride I felt was worth more than any paycheck. In the early 80s, I took the biggest risk of my life and invested everything I had into starting my own furniture manufacturing business. Those first few years were brutal. I worked 16-hour days, slept on a cot in my workshop, and ate the cheapest food I could find. But slowly, my reputation for quality craftsmanship grew. By the end of the decade, I had 20 employees and a real factory floor. I met Sarah at a trade show in Chicago in 1986. She was working for an interior design firm and stopped by my booth to look at my catalog. She had the warmest smile and the sharpest eye for detail. She pointed out features in my designs that even I had not fully appreciated. We talked for hours after the show closed, and I knew before the night was over that she was special. We married a year later, and Sarah became not just my wife but my business partner. She had a natural talent for marketing and customer relations that complemented my production focus. Together, we expanded the business beyond anything I could have achieved alone. For years, we tried to have a child without success. The disappointments took a toll on us both, especially Sarah. After several miscarriages and failed fertility treatments, we had almost given up hope when Sarah became pregnant with Daniel. The pregnancy was difficult, and she was on bed rest for the last trimester. When Daniel was finally born healthy and strong in 1991, it felt like a miracle. From the moment he arrived, Daniel became the center of our world. I worked even harder to ensure he would have opportunities I never did. Sarah and I agreed that we wanted to provide him with the best education possible. We started saving for college before he could even walk. As Daniel grew, I made sure to give him everything I had lacked as a child. Private schools, summer camps, music lessons, the best clothes. Perhaps we overdid it, but we wanted him to have every advantage. I remember working through weekends and holidays during the business expansion years, telling myself it was all for Daniel's future. Unlike me, Daniel never showed interest in the furniture business. He was more drawn to finance and numbers than to craftsmanship and design. I was initially disappointed, but came to accept that he needed to follow his own path. When he was accepted to an Ivy League university to study economics, Sarah and I could not have been prouder. We paid his tuition in full, bought him a car, and set him up in an apartment near campus. After college, Daniel landed a job at a prestigious financial advising firm in Boston. His career seemed to take off quickly. He was making good money and moving up the corporate ladder. During one of his visits home, he introduced us to Tiffany, a real estate agent with a glamorous appearance and expensive tastes. They had met at a networking event, and according to Daniel, it was love at first sight. Sarah had reservations about Tiffany from the beginning. "There is something calculating about her," she confided to me after their first visit. "The way she looked around our house, it was like she was appraising everything." I dismissed Sarah's concerns as overprotectiveness. Daniel was happy, and that was what mattered to me. They married in a lavish ceremony that cost me more than my first factory. I did not mind. I wanted my only son to have the wedding of his dreams. About a year later, Emily was born, and I experienced the joy of becoming a grandfather. From the first time I held her, Emily captured my heart completely. She had Sarah's warm smile and curious eyes. As she grew, she also showed Sarah's perceptiveness and kind heart. Life was good until Sarah was diagnosed with aggressive breast cancer when Emily was 9 years old. The diagnosis blindsided us all. Sarah fought bravely through surgeries, chemotherapy, and radiation, but the cancer had spread too far before it was detected. She declined rapidly in the final months. During Sarah's illness, Daniel and Tiffany rarely visited. They were too busy with work and raising Emily, they said. I took a step back from the business to care for Sarah full-time. We had good management in place, and I had no regrets about prioritizing my wife's care. I was by her side when she took her last breath 3 years ago. The loss left a hole in my heart that nothing could fill. After the funeral, I expected to lean on Daniel for emotional support, as we both grieved Sarah's passing. Instead, he seemed distracted and uncomfortable with my grief. He and Tiffany started visiting more frequently, but their conversations always seemed to circle back to my financial situation. "Dad, have you updated your will since Mom passed?" Daniel asked, just 2 weeks after we buried Sarah. "You should really consider putting the house in my name for estate planning purposes," he suggested another time. At first, I attributed his focus on financial matters to his profession. Perhaps talking about money was his way of coping with grief. I was still active as the owner of my business, though I had scaled back my day-to-day involvement years earlier. The company was worth several $1,000,000, and I had substantial savings and investments as well. Sarah and I had lived well, but modestly compared to what we could afford. We had always valued financial security over flashy displays of wealth. Around this time, I began experiencing some concerning health issues: occasional chest pains, dizziness, and fatigue. I kept these problems to myself, not wanting to worry Daniel. In retrospect, maybe that was my first mistake. But I had no idea then how quickly everything would unravel, or how the fortune Sarah and I had built through decades of hard work would become the target of the very person we had sacrificed so much to provide for. The first real sign something was wrong came about 2 months after Sarah's funeral. I was looking for our wedding album to reminisce about happier times when I noticed it was missing from the bookshelf where it had always been kept. Several other photo albums were gone too. When I asked Daniel about them during his next visit, he shrugged it off. "You probably misplaced them, Dad. You have been pretty forgetful lately," he said, with a dismissive tone that was becoming increasingly common. I had not been forgetful at all, but his comment planted a seed of doubt. Had I moved the albums and forgotten I was still grieving Quora? And grief can do strange things to the mind. I let it go, but started paying closer attention to my surroundings. Over the next few weeks, I noticed other items disappearing. A small Tiffany lamp that had been Sarah's favorite. A set of silver candlesticks that had belonged to my mother. An antique pocket watch my grandfather had given me. Valuable items, yes, but more importantly, items with deep sentimental value. I mentioned the missing items to Daniel again, and his response was more concerning this time. Dad, this is exactly what I am worried about. These memory lapses could be signs of early dementia. Maybe we should have you evaluated. He said, his voice filled with what sounded like concern, but his eyes remained cold. I knew I had not imagined the missing items, but Daniel's suggestion made me question myself. Was something wrong with my memory? With my mind? The thought terrified me. One afternoon, I overheard Daniel and Tiffany talking in the kitchen when they thought I was napping in my study. How much longer do we have to deal with his stubborn attachment to money? Tiffany whispered harshly. We could do so much with it. That vacation home in Aspen is not going to wait forever. Patience, Daniel replied. He is not going to just hand everything over. We need to be strategic. Their words hit me like a physical blow. I sat frozen in my chair, unable to believe what I was hearing. My own son and his wife were plotting to get their hands on my money. Not out of concern for my welfare, but for a vacation home in Aspen. A few days later, Daniel approached me with a brochure for an assisted living facility. I found this great place, Dad. You would have your own apartment, but with staff available 24 hours a day. I think it would be perfect for you. The facility looked luxurious and expensive, but the thought of leaving the home I had shared with Sarah felt unbearable. I am comfortable here, I told him firmly. This is my home. But you are all alone here, Daniel pressed. What if you fall? What if you have an emergency? I worry about you all the time. His concern might have seemed genuine if I had not overheard his conversation with Tiffany. Now I recognized it as manipulation. They wanted me out of my house, away from my belongings, isolated and dependent. My suspicions were confirmed when I accidentally discovered documents in Daniel's briefcase while looking for a pen. He had left it open on the kitchen counter while taking a phone call outside. Inside was a folder containing power of attorney forms with my name on them, but not my signature. There were also printouts about guardianship laws and determining mental incompetence. My blood ran cold as I carefully put everything back the way I had found it. They were not just hoping to convince me to give them my money. They were actively planning to take control of my assets, possibly by having me declared mentally incompetent. Around this time, I also began to notice my social circle shrinking. My weekly lunch with my former business partner Richard suddenly got canceled repeatedly because Daniel called and said you were not feeling well. My neighbor Tom stopped coming over for our usual Friday night chess games because your son mentioned you needed more rest these days. I was being systematically cut off from my support network, and Daniel was the one doing the cutting. When I confronted him about it, his response left me speechless. Dad, you are imagining things again, he said with exaggerated patience. I am just looking out for your best interests. You have been through a lot with Mom's passing. It is natural to be paranoid sometimes. The gaslighting was so blatant that I almost doubted my own sanity. Was I being paranoid? Was grief affecting my judgment? I did not think so, but Daniel was so convincing in his concern. During this confrontation, the stress triggered one of my chest pain episodes. As I winced and reached for my heart, Daniel's expression changed from fake concern to something that looked almost like opportunity. See, this is exactly why you need more care than I can provide. Your health is declining, Dad. Let me help you before something serious happens. In that moment, I saw clearly that my son was waiting for me to become ill or incapacitated. He was counting on it, perhaps even hoping for it. The realization broke something in me. This was the boy I had worked so hard for, sacrificed so much for. Now he saw me only as an obstacle between him and my money, as my world seemed to be shrinking and darkening. One light remained constant, my granddaughter, Emily. Unlike her parents, her concern for me was genuine and untainted by greed. At 12 years old, she showed more compassion and insight than her father ever had. "Grandpa, why does Dad keep telling people you are sick when you are not?" She asked me one afternoon when we were alone. Her directness startled me. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" I asked. "I heard him on the phone telling your friend Mr. Richard that you were too confused for visitors. But you are not confused at all," she said, with the simple clarity of a child who has not yet learned to doubt her own perceptions. "Your dad is just worried about me," I said, not wanting to burden her with the ugly truth. Emily gave me a look far too knowing for her years. "No, Grandpa. He and Mom are always talking about your money when they think I am not listening." In that moment, I realized Emily was not just a source of comfort in my increasingly lonely life. She was a witness to what was happening, an ally who saw through her parents' deception. And as Daniel and Tiffany's plans accelerated, her role would become even more crucial than I could have imagined. 1 month after I discovered the power of attorney documents, Daniel and Tiffany announced they were moving into my house temporarily to help care for me. Despite my protests that I did not need caregivers, they arrived with suitcases and took over the guest bedroom. "This arrangement makes the most sense, Dad," Daniel explained as they unpacked. "This way we can keep an eye on you 24/7. Plus, Emily will get to spend more time with her grandfather." The only silver lining was indeed more time with Emily. But the rest of the arrangement quickly revealed itself as another step in their plan to control my life and assets. Within days of moving in, my landline phone mysteriously stopped working. Daniel replaced it with a complicated smartphone that he knew I would struggle to operate. "This is much better, Dad. It has emergency features and GPS tracking for your safety." What it actually did was make it difficult for me to make private calls. Every time I tried to use it, I needed Daniel or Tiffany's help ensuring they knew exactly who I was contacting. Next came the financial takeover. Daniel convinced me to add him as a signatory on my checking account, just in case of emergency. Once he had access, he began questioning every purchase I made, no matter how small. "Dad, do you really need new shirts?" "The ones you have are fine," he would say. Or, "That donation to the Cancer Research Foundation seems excessive. Let me handle your charitable giving from now on." Soon I found myself asking permission to spend my own money. The power dynamic had shifted completely. I was being treated like a child in my own home by my own child. Tiffany, meanwhile, took it upon herself to update my house. Without consulting me, she hired painters to change the wall colors Sarah and I had carefully selected years ago. She replaced comfortable, familiar furniture with modern pieces that looked nice but hurt my back. Most painfully, she removed family photos from the walls, claiming she was having them professionally reframed as a surprise. They never reappeared. I felt like a stranger in my own home. Everywhere I looked, evidence of my life with Sarah was disappearing, replaced by Tiffany's impersonal decorating style. When I objected, I was told I was resistant to positive changes and living too much in the past. Through all of this, Emily watched with increasing distress. I often caught her observing her parents with a furrowed brow and troubled eyes. Unlike them, she seemed to understand that a home is more than just a physical space. It is a repository of memories, a sanctuary of familiarity and comfort. One afternoon, I found Emily in my study looking at an old photo album she had rescued from being organized by her mother. "I saved this from Mom's donation pile," she whispered. "I knew you would want to keep it." It was the album containing photos from Daniel's childhood. The irony was not lost on me. My granddaughter was preserving memories of her father that he himself was eager to erase. Emily and I developed a secret routine of meeting in my workshop in the backyard. Daniel and Tiffany rarely ventured there. It was dusty and unrefined, everything they disdained. But for Emily and me, it became our sanctuary, the one place we could speak freely. During one of these workshop conversations, Emily revealed something that confirmed my worst fears. "I heard Mom and Dad talking about the plan last night," she said, her young voice serious. "They did not know I was awake. Dad said something about papers being ready soon, and Mom said they need to move quickly before—" "Before what, sweetheart?" I prompted when she hesitated. "Before you get suspicious and change your will." She finished, looking down at her hands. My heart sank. So there was a specific plan in motion with a timeline. I needed to find out more, but I had to be careful not to put Emily in an uncomfortable position between her parents and me. "Emily, you do not have to spy for me," I assured her. "This is adult business, and I do not want you worrying about it." She looked up at me with determination in her eyes. "But you are the only one who is nice to me. Dad and Mom are always busy or angry. They only pretend to listen to me. You actually care about what I think and feel." Her words both warmed and broke my heart. What kind of parents had my son and his wife become? Not only were they plotting to steal my fortune, but they were neglecting their own daughter's emotional needs in the process. My suspicions about financial misconduct were confirmed when I managed to get access to my mail before Daniel could intercept it. A bank statement showed several large transfers from my account to an unfamiliar investment fund. When confronted, Daniel claimed he was diversifying my portfolio for better returns. But the transfers had been made without my knowledge or consent, and the investment fund, I later discovered, was managed by a college friend of his. Most alarmingly, I found evidence of forged signatures on financial documents when I secretly searched Daniel's home office during a rare occasion when both he and Tiffany were out of the house. There was my signature on papers I had never seen authorizing changes to accounts I did not even know existed. I needed legal help, but Daniel had made sure I had no access to my longtime family lawyer, Jerome Patterson. Whenever I mentioned wanting to speak with Jerome about estate planning, Daniel insisted that his firm's legal team was more up to date on current laws and that Jerome had mostly retired anyway. In reality, as I would later learn, Jerome had been trying to reach me for months. Daniel had been intercepting his calls and emails telling him I was too ill to deal with legal matters and that he was handling everything on my behalf. As Daniel and Tiffany's grip on my life tightened, I felt increasingly helpless. But watching Emily's distress at her parents' behavior strengthened my resolve. This was no longer just about protecting my assets. It was about standing up for myself, preserving my dignity, and perhaps most importantly, showing Emily that one should never allow themselves to be victimized, even by family. I began to realize that I needed to fight back, not just for my sake, but for hers as well. She needed to see that age did not equate to weakness, that standing up for oneself was not just a right, but a responsibility. And as their plan accelerated, so did my determination to outmaneuver them at their own game. The morning Emily whispered her warning to me changed everything. I was sitting in the sunroom, supposedly reading the newspaper, but actually lost in thoughts about how to regain control of my life when she approached me with a glass of water. Leaning close as she handed me the drink, she whispered urgently, "Grandpa, tonight, they plan to steal your fortune. I heard everything." My hands trembled slightly, but I managed to keep my expression neutral in case Daniel or Tiffany walked in. "Tell me more when it is safe," I murmured, pretending to thank her for the water. Later, when her parents went grocery shopping, Emily shared what she had overheard. The plan was more sinister than even I had imagined. "They are going to give you extra sleeping pills in your evening tea," she explained, her young face serious beyond her years. Dad said once you are really out, they will call an ambulance and tell them you had some kind of breakdown. Mom has papers for the hospital that will say you need psychological evaluation. I felt physically ill hearing this. And then what? I asked, though I already suspected the answer. Dad said once they have you declared mentally incompetent, they can control everything. He talked about something called conservatorship. She pronounced the word carefully, clearly repeating it exactly as she had heard it. They want to do it tonight because they found out you have a meeting with someone named Richard tomorrow. So they knew I had finally managed to contact my old business partner. That explained the urgency. Richard would recognize immediately that I was of sound mind, and he had enough influence in the community to create problems for Daniel's plan. What hurt most was remembering all I had sacrificed for Daniel. I had missed school plays and baseball games to work late building the business that created the very fortune he was now scheming to take. I had paid for the education that taught him the financial and legal knowledge he was using against me. I had given him everything, and in return, he was plotting to strip me of my dignity and autonomy. The bitter irony was not lost on me. I had worked so hard to give Daniel advantages I never had, and now he was using those advantages as weapons against me. My health, already strained by months of stress and emotional turmoil, took another hit as I absorbed the reality of my son's betrayal. That night, alone in my bedroom, I experienced the worst chest pains yet, a crushing pressure that left me gasping for breath. I did not call for help, knowing Daniel and Tiffany would use any sign of physical weakness to accelerate their plans. Instead, I practiced the breathing exercises my doctor had recommended and waited for the pain to subside. As I lay there in the dark, I reflected on how completely I had failed as a father. Where had I gone wrong? Had I given Daniel too much? Not enough time or attention? Had my focus on providing material advantages somehow stunted his moral development? The next morning, Emily helped me locate documents Daniel had hidden from me. While her parents were occupied with a conference call in the home office, she showed me where they had stored my original will, property deeds, and financial statements in a locked file cabinet in their bedroom. Mom keeps the key on her keychain, but I know where she puts it at night, Emily explained, producing a small silver key from her pocket. I borrowed it this morning while she was in the shower. The resourcefulness and loyalty of this 12-year-old child both amazed and saddened me. She should have been enjoying her childhood, not engaging in espionage against her own parents. Armed with knowledge of exactly what documents Daniel had accessed, I briefly considered a direct confrontation. Perhaps if I laid everything on the table, appealed to whatever shred of decency might remain in my son, we could find a path forward based on honesty rather than deception. But that faint hope was extinguished later that day when I overheard Daniel on the phone in what he thought was a private conversation. "The old man has no clue what is coming," he said to someone, possibly a friend or colleague. "We are literally counting down days until we can get our hands on everything. The house alone is worth over $1 million in this market." The casual cruelty in his voice, the complete absence of filial respect or affection, shocked me to my core. This was not a temporary moral lapse or a misunderstanding. This was who my son had become, or perhaps who he had always been, beneath the surface. The final confirmation came when I overheard Tiffany discussing plans for my workshop with an interior designer who had come to the house. "This whole space will make a perfect home gym once it is all done," she said, gesturing around the workshop I had lovingly built and where I had taught Daniel to make his first birdhouse as a child. "All this dusty old equipment will be gone, and we will have floor-to-ceiling mirrors on that wall." They were not just planning to take my money. They were erasing every trace of me, of the life I had built, the business I had created, the memories I cherished. They were writing me out of existence while I was still breathing. That night alone in my bedroom, I experienced a complete emotional breakdown. For the first time since Sarah's death, I wept openly, great heaving sobs of grief and betrayal. I had lost my wife, and now I was losing my son, not to death, but to something perhaps even more final, the revelation of his true character. Emily found me like this, having slipped into my room to check on me. She sat beside me on the bed, and in a role reversal that should never have been necessary, patted my hand comfortingly. "We will figure something out, Grandpa," she said, with a determination that reminded me powerfully of Sarah. "They are not going to win." Looking into her earnest young face, I felt something shift within me. The paralyzing grief and shock began to give way to resolve. Emily was right. They were not going to win. Not just because I refused to let them take what was rightfully mine, but because I refused to let Emily grow up thinking this kind of behavior was acceptable or inevitable. In that moment, I made a decision. I would fight back, not with the rage and bitterness that was my first instinct, but with the strategic thinking that had built my business. Daniel and Tiffany thought they were dealing with a helpless old man. They were about to discover just how wrong they were. My first move was to contact Richard without Daniel and Tiffany knowing. Emily, proving herself resourceful beyond her years, suggested using her school tablet to send an email since her parents never monitored her school account. "Mr. Johnson thinks I am doing extra research for my science project," she explained, referring to her teacher. "He lets me keep the tablet at home." I dictated a message to Richard, explaining the situation in urgent but clear terms, asking him to contact my old lawyer, Jerome Patterson, immediately. Emily typed it out, her small fingers flying over the screen with the digital native fluency of her generation. Richard responded within hours, his message brief but reassuring. "Matt, hold tight. Bringing in reinforcements. Do not let them know you are onto them. Can meet tomorrow at the diner, 11 a.m. Send Emily alone if you cannot get away." The next challenge was creating an opportunity for Emily to slip out to meet Richard. Fortunately, her school was within walking distance of the old diner where Richard and I had held countless business meetings over the years. "Tell your teacher you have a dentist appointment," I instructed Emily. "I will write a note. Your parents will never know you were not at school." "But that would be lying," Emily said, her brow furrowed. "Sometimes, sweetheart, when people are trying to hurt you, a strategic untruth is necessary for protection," I explained gently. "I would not ask you to do this if it was not important." She nodded solemnly. "I understand, Grandpa. It is like in my history book, when people hid others during wars to protect them." Her moral compass was so much stronger than her father's had proven to be. The irony was not lost on me. While Emily met with Richard the next day, I began my own counterintelligence operation at home. I started by appearing increasingly confused and forgetful around Daniel and Tiffany. I would ask the same question multiple times, pretend to lose track of conversations, and feign disorientation about the day of the week. "See what I mean?" Daniel said to Tiffany when I deliberately put my house slippers in the refrigerator. "His condition is deteriorating faster than I expected." "Good," Tiffany replied when she thought I was out of earshot. "The sooner we get everything signed over, the better." Their transparent satisfaction at my apparent decline was revolting, but I maintained my act. Every sign of my deterioration made them less cautious, more likely to make mistakes. Emily returned from her meeting with Richard with news that lifted my spirits considerably. Jerome Patterson had been trying to reach me for months, concerned about unusual activity on some of my accounts. When Richard explained the situation, Jerome immediately began preparing legal countermeasures. The next phase of our plan required precise timing and coordination. Using Emily's tablet, Richard arranged for me to meet secretly with Jerome after Daniel and Tiffany had gone to bed. Jerome would park down the street, and I would slip out to meet him in his car. The night of this clandestine meeting, I feigned extreme fatigue at dinner. "I think I will turn in early tonight," I told Daniel and Tiffany. "I feel especially tired." "That is probably best, Dad," Daniel replied with false concern. "You need your rest." At midnight, with Daniel and Tiffany asleep, I carefully made my way out of the house to meet Jerome. The elderly lawyer had been my trusted advisor for decades, and the look of outrage on his face when I explained the full situation told me I had chosen the right ally. "This is elder abuse, pure and simple," Jerome declared. "We are going to stop it cold." Over the next hour, huddled in his car like conspirators in a spy novel, we created a new ironclad trust that would protect both my assets and Emily's future inheritance. Jerome had brought all the necessary paperwork prepared based on Richard's information. "Sign here and here," he instructed, pointing to marked lines on multiple documents. "This revokes any power of attorney Daniel may have forged and establishes a trust that cannot be altered without multiple trustees' approval, including Richard and myself." "What about Emily?" I asked. "I want to make sure she is protected no matter what." Jerome nodded approvingly. "I have included provisions for her education and welfare that Daniel and Tiffany cannot touch. The trust will provide for her directly once she turns 18, bypassing her parents entirely if necessary." With those signatures, I felt the first glimmer of hope in months. But documents alone were not enough. We needed evidence of Daniel and Tiffany's intentions and actions. Jerome suggested setting up hidden cameras in my bedroom and home office. "Michigan is a one-party consent state for recordings," he explained. "As the homeowner, you have every right to monitor your own property." Richard arranged for the equipment through a private security firm he had used for his own business. The following day, while Daniel and Tiffany were at a real estate showing, ironically, for a luxury property they planned to buy with my money, Richard's security expert installed tiny, undetectable cameras in strategic locations. The cameras would capture not just video, but audio as well, documenting any incriminating conversations or actions. If Daniel and Tiffany proceeded with their plan to drug me and fake a medical emergency, we would have irrefutable evidence. As these preparations progressed, I experienced profound emotional turmoil. This was my son, my only child, the boy I had once taught to ride a bike and fish in the lake behind our first house. How had it come to this, setting traps, gathering evidence, treating him like a criminal? There were moments when doubts crept in. Was I overreacting? Had grief over Sarah's death warped my perspective? But then I would remember the cold calculation in Daniel's voice as he discussed counting down days until he could seize control of my assets. I would recall Tiffany's casual cruelty as she planned to transform my beloved workshop into a home gym. No, I was not imagining things. The threat was real, and the stakes could not be higher. This was not just about money, but about my dignity, my autonomy, and most importantly, about showing Emily that predatory behavior should never go unchallenged, even from family members. As the trap was set and the final preparations made, Emily and I developed our own private signal system. If she heard her parents discussing their plans, she would request hot chocolate, our code for "be alert." If she discovered any new information, she would complain about homework, giving us an excuse to talk privately in my study. The waiting was perhaps the hardest part. Each day brought a new test of my acting abilities as I continued to play the role of declining mental faculties. Each night I lay awake wondering if this would be the night they made their move. Through it all, Emily remained my steadfast ally, showing courage and moral clarity well beyond her years. "We are doing the right thing, Grandpa," she assured me during one of our secret conversations in the workshop. Mom and Dad are wrong, and they need to learn that. Out of the mouths of babes, as they say. In her simple, straightforward assessment, Emily had cut through all my adult rationalizations and hesitations. Yes, what we were doing was right. Daniel and Tiffany needed to learn that there are consequences for treating people, even elderly parents, as nothing more than obstacles between themselves and wealth. As we finalized our countermeasures, a strange calm settled over me. The pieces were in place. The trap was set. Now we just needed Daniel and Tiffany to spring it themselves. The day they chose to make their move started like any other. Daniel went to his office in the morning, while Tiffany took Emily to school. I spent the day puttering in my workshop, trying to calm my nerves with the familiar rhythms of woodworking. By now, we had hidden cameras not just in my bedroom and the home office, but also in the kitchen and living room, capturing every angle of the house. When Daniel returned home earlier than usual, I knew something was up. He and Tiffany exchanged meaningful glances over dinner, the kind of silent communication that passes between conspirators. Emily caught my eye briefly and tapped her hot chocolate mug. Our signal. She had heard something. "I think I will have my evening tea and turn in early," I announced after dinner, playing right into their hands. "I did not sleep well last night." "Good idea, Dad," Daniel replied a little too enthusiastically. "I will bring your tea to your room. I bought a new calming blend that might help you rest better." I thanked him with just the right amount of genuine gratitude and confusion, maintaining the character I had been playing for weeks now. As I walked to my bedroom, I caught a glimpse of Tiffany opening a small pill bottle in the kitchen, her back to me but her actions visible in the reflection of the microwave door. In my room, I quickly checked that the cameras were operational, their tiny indicator lights glowing steadily behind picture frames and books on shelves. Then I prepared for my performance, changing into pajamas and getting into bed just as Daniel knocked on the door. "Here you go, Dad," he said, handing me a steaming mug. "This should help you get a good night's rest." I thanked him and took a small sip, careful to keep the liquid in the front of my mouth without swallowing. As soon as Daniel left, I spat the tea into a tissue and disposed of the rest in the potted plant beside my bed. I had anticipated they might try to drug me and had prepared accordingly. Then I settled in to wait, pretending to fall into a deep sleep. I regulated my breathing, made it heavy and rhythmic, occasionally adding a light snore for authenticity. The performance needed to be convincing, because I knew they would check on me before proceeding with their plan. Sure enough, about an hour later, my bedroom door creaked open. Through nearly closed eyelids, I saw Daniel peering in at me. He approached the bed and waved his hand in front of my face. Satisfied that I was unconscious, he left, closing the door behind him. I heard hushed voices in the hallway, then footsteps moving away. Using the skills honed through decades of rising early to work in my factory, I remained absolutely still while staying completely alert. Every sense was heightened as I waited. Around midnight, as Emily had warned, the door opened again. This time both Daniel and Tiffany entered. I kept my breathing deep and regular, feigning drug-induced unconsciousness. "He is completely out," Daniel whispered to Tiffany. "Those pills would knock out a horse." "Good," Tiffany replied, her voice cold and clinical. "Let us get everything ready before we call the ambulance. Once he is in the psych ward, we can file the emergency conservatorship papers first thing in the morning." Their conversation continued, each word more damning than the last, as they laid out their plan in detail. They would claim I had become delusional, that I was a danger to myself, that I had been experiencing severe paranoia and confusion for months. "We have Dr. Martin's statement already," Daniel said, referring to a doctor I had never met. "He has agreed to sign off on the initial psychiatric hold based on our documented concerns. And once the conservatorship is granted, Tiffany asked. Then everything becomes ours to manage, Daniel replied with undisguised glee. The house, the business, the investment accounts, all of it. We will need to keep him in some kind of facility for appearances, but nothing too expensive. The bulk of the money will be ours to use as we see fit. The casual cruelty of their planning struck me like physical blows. They spoke of me as if I were already gone, as if I were nothing more than a bundle of assets to be divided and consumed. There was not a hint of remorse or filial affection in Daniel's voice as he plotted to warehouse his own father in a cut-rate facility while he enjoyed the fruits of my life's work. "What about all the old man's stuff?" Tiffany asked, glancing around my bedroom with obvious distaste. "Most of it is outdated junk, but some pieces might fetch a decent price at auction." "We will clear it all out once he is institutionalized," Daniel assured her. "Anything valuable gets sold, the rest donated or trashed. I want no reminders of this place once it is ours to redecorate." As they continued discussing the disposal of my possessions, my life's memories designated as either valuable or junk, I felt an icy calm replace the hurt and betrayal. These people were strangers to me now. The son I had raised, loved, and sacrificed for was gone if he had ever truly existed at all. Daniel moved to my bedside table and picked up the framed photo of Sarah that I kept there. "We should probably keep a few personal items to display at the facility," he said, "for appearance's sake when we visit, which we will do occasionally, at least at first." "Do we have to?" Tiffany whined. "Those places are so depressing." "Just until everything is legally settled," Daniel assured her. "After that, we can claim his condition makes visits too upsetting for him. No one will question it." They had thought of everything, or so they believed. Daniel pulled out his phone. "Time to make the call. Remember, we stick to the story. He was acting erratically all day, then became unresponsive. We are concerned he may have taken too much of his medication, possibly intentionally." As he prepared to call for the ambulance that would transport me to a psychiatric facility, I decided the charade had gone far enough. It was time to spring the trap. I sat up suddenly in bed, startling them both so badly that Tiffany actually screamed. "There is no need to call an ambulance, Daniel," I said calmly. "I am feeling quite well, actually, and my mind is perfectly clear, clear enough to have heard and understood every word you just said." The look of shock on their faces was almost comical. Daniel recovered first, his expression quickly shifting from surprise to calculated concern. "Dad, you are confused," he said, his voice dripping with false worry. "You have been having episodes like this for months now. That is why we are getting you help." "Interesting theory," I replied, reaching for the bedside lamp and turning it on. "But I believe the police and my lawyer might have a different interpretation of events." As if on cue, there was a loud knock at the front door. Daniel and Tiffany exchanged panicked glances. "That would be the help I actually asked for," I explained, getting out of bed and reaching for my robe. "Unlike the kind you were planning to force on me." The expression on Daniel's face when the police officers entered my bedroom, accompanied by Jerome Patterson and Richard, was something I will never forget. It was the look of someone watching their carefully constructed scheme collapse in real time. "What is going on here?" Daniel demanded, trying to sound authoritative despite his obvious panic. "My father is unwell. These people should not be upsetting him." Jerome stepped forward, every inch the distinguished attorney despite the late hour. "On the contrary, Mr. Caldwell, your father is perfectly well, as a thorough medical examination tomorrow will confirm. What is not well is the situation we have uncovered regarding your treatment of him." One of the officers, a sergeant with a compassionate but firm demeanor, addressed me directly. "Mr. Caldwell, we received some concerning information from your attorney, about potential elder abuse and financial exploitation. Are you comfortable discussing this now, or would you prefer to make a statement tomorrow? Now is fine, Sergeant, I replied, feeling stronger with each passing moment. I believe your officers will find all the evidence they need in the recordings from the cameras in this room and throughout the house. Daniel's face drained of color. Cameras. What cameras? This is ridiculous. My father is paranoid and confused. The cameras I installed in my own home, I clarified, which have been recording continuously for the past week, including your conversations about drugging me, fabricating mental health concerns, and taking control of my assets against my will. As if to punctuate my statement, Richard stepped forward with a tablet displaying a crystal-clear feed from the hidden cameras, including Daniel and Tiffany's damning conversation from just minutes earlier. While the officers took statements and collected the recording devices as evidence, Emily appeared in the doorway, her small face a mixture of relief and sadness. She had been hiding in her designated safe spot, a window seat in the hallway alcove where she could hear everything without being seen. "Emily, go back to bed," Tiffany snapped, finally finding her voice. "This does not concern you." "Actually," Jerome interjected smoothly, "Miss Emily's testimony has been quite valuable in understanding the timeline of events. She has shown remarkable courage in protecting her grandfather." Emily moved to my side and I put my arm around her shoulders protectively. She had been my ally through this entire ordeal, risking her parents' anger to do what she knew was right. In that moment, I saw so much of Sarah in her, the same moral strength and clarity. "You put your own daughter up to spying on us?" Daniel asked incredulously. "You involved a child in this setup?" "Emily made her own choices," I replied calmly. "She recognized right from wrong without any prompting from me, something her parents apparently failed to teach her by example." As the evidence mounted, Daniel switched tactics, moving from denial to minimization. "This is all a misunderstanding," he insisted to the officers. "We were genuinely concerned about my father's mental state. Perhaps we were overzealous in our approach, but our intentions were good." Jerome, who had been reviewing the recorded footage on Richard's tablet, looked up with cold fury in his eyes. "Your recorded statements about luxury properties, auction values of your father's possessions, and cut-rate facilities suggest otherwise, Mr. Caldwell, as do the forged financial documents we have recovered." One of the officers approached Daniel and Tiffany. "We have enough here to take you both in for questioning regarding attempted financial elder abuse, which is a felony in this state. You have the right to remain silent." As the officers read them their Miranda rights, the reality of their situation finally seemed to dawn on Daniel and Tiffany. Their carefully constructed plan had not just failed, it had backfired catastrophically, exposing their actions to legal scrutiny and potential criminal charges. "Dad, you cannot be serious," Daniel pleaded as the officers prepared to escort them out. "We are family. This is not how family disputes should be handled." His invocation of family after all he had done to betray that very concept struck me as the final irony. "You stopped treating me as family the moment you began plotting to strip me of my dignity and autonomy," I told him quietly. "You made your choices, Daniel. Now you will face the consequences of those choices." As they were led away, Emily buried her face against my side. I felt her small shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Despite everything her parents had done, they were still her parents, and seeing them taken away by police was traumatic for her. I held her close, wishing I could shield her from this pain. "It is going to be all right, sweetheart," I assured her, though I was not entirely sure how. The road ahead would be complicated for all of us, but especially for this brave, perceptive child caught in the middle of adult betrayal and consequences. Jerome approached us, his expression softening as he observed Emily's distress. Matt, we should discuss custody arrangements for Emily. Given the circumstances, I believe we can make a strong case for temporary guardianship while this situation is sorted out. I nodded, grateful for his foresight. In the shock and relief of the moment, I had not yet considered the immediate practical implications for Emily. She could not go with her parents to the police station, and given the nature of the charges, they might not be returning home anytime soon. "Emily," I said gently, "would you be okay staying with me for now? We can set up your room exactly how you like it." She looked up at me with tear-stained cheeks but nodded firmly. "I want to stay with you, Grandpa. I do not want to go anywhere else." As the night's events finally wound down and the house emptied of officers and attorneys, Emily and I sat together in the kitchen sharing hot chocolate for real this time, not as a code, but as a small comfort in the aftermath of upheaval. "Did I do the right thing, Grandpa?" she asked softly. "By telling you what they were planning." I considered her question carefully, wanting to be honest without burdening her young shoulders with too much adult complexity. "You did the right thing," I assured her. "Sometimes the right thing is also the hard thing. It takes courage to stand up for what is right, especially when the people doing wrong are people you love. I am very proud of you, Emily. Your grandmother would be proud too." At the mention of Sarah, Emily smiled slightly. "Mom says I look like her sometimes." "You have her smile," I agreed. "And more importantly, you have her heart, her sense of what is right and fair." As we sat in the quiet kitchen, the events of the night still reverberating around us, I realized that while one chapter of my life had ended painfully, another was beginning. Not the lonely final chapter I had feared when I discovered Daniel and Tiffany's betrayal, but something unexpected and precious, a second chance at family through this remarkable granddaughter who had shown more wisdom and courage than many adults I had known. The legal aftermath would be complicated. The emotional healing would take time. But in that moment, with Emily safe beside me and the immediate threat neutralized, I felt something I had not experienced since Sarah's passing: hope for the future, and the profound peace that comes from knowing you are not alone. The months following that dramatic night brought significant changes to our lives. As expected, Daniel and Tiffany faced serious legal consequences for their actions. The evidence against them was overwhelming: the recordings, the forged documents, the testimony from financial institutions about unauthorized transactions, and statements from the doctor they had attempted to bribe for a false mental health evaluation. They eventually accepted a plea deal to avoid a public trial, which included restitution, probation, and mandatory counseling. The criminal charges would have lasting consequences for Daniel's career in financial services, effectively ending it. Tiffany's real estate license was also suspended, pending review by the licensing board. The family court proceedings were more complex and emotionally challenging. I filed for temporary guardianship of Emily, which was granted almost immediately given the circumstances. Daniel and Tiffany initially fought this arrangement, claiming I had poisoned Emily against them, but their arguments held little weight against the documented evidence of their behavior. After psychological evaluations and home studies, the court awarded me permanent primary custody of Emily, with Daniel and Tiffany granted limited supervised visitation rights, contingent on their progress in court-mandated family counseling. It was a bittersweet victory. While I was overjoyed to provide Emily with a stable, loving home, I took no pleasure in the circumstances that had made it necessary. Emily's adjustment to living with me full-time had its challenges. Despite her role in exposing her parents' plot, she still experienced conflicting emotions about them. Some nights she would cry herself to sleep, wondering if their current situation was somehow her fault. I would sit with her, assuring her that adults make their own choices and bear responsibility for the consequences. But if I had not told you what they were planning, they would not be in trouble, she reasoned one difficult evening. If they had not been planning something wrong, there would have been nothing for you to tell me, I pointed out gently. You did not create the situation, sweetheart. You just brought the truth to light, which is always the right thing to do even when it is painful. Over time, Emily began to heal. We established new routines and traditions together. I enrolled her in a good school near my home where she quickly made friends and became involved in the science club and orchestra. Her natural intelligence and resilience helped her adapt, though the emotional scars would take longer to fade. My own health improved dramatically once the chronic stress of Daniel and Tiffany's manipulation was removed. The chest pains that had plagued me decreased in frequency and severity. My doctor, amazed by the change, remarked that stress truly could be as damaging as any physical ailment. Whatever you are doing differently, keep it up, he advised during a checkup. Your numbers have not looked this good in years. What I was doing differently was rediscovering purpose and connection. With Emily in my life, I had a reason to stay active and engaged with the world. I began reaching out to old friends and colleagues, rebuilding the social network that Daniel had systematically dismantled. Richard became a frequent visitor to our home, often bringing his grandchildren to play with Emily. My neighbor Tom resumed our chess games now, with Emily learning to play as well. Jerome Patterson, though officially retired, took a special interest in our case and became something of a grandfather figure to Emily himself. These renewed connections led to an unexpected new chapter in my life. During a conversation with Richard about our experiences, we realized that financial elder abuse was far more common than most people realized. Many seniors, unlike me, lacked the resources or support to fight back effectively. There should be more awareness about this, Richard mused, and more practical help for seniors who find themselves in similar situations. That observation sparked an idea. With Richard's business expertise and my first-hand experience, we established a foundation dedicated to combating elder abuse through education, advocacy, and direct assistance. We named it the Sarah Caldwell Foundation, in honor of my late wife, who had always championed the vulnerable. The foundation quickly gained traction, attracting volunteers, donations, and media attention. I found myself speaking at senior centers and community events, sharing my story to help others recognize warning signs and protect themselves. Emily often accompanied me to these presentations, her presence a powerful reminder of how intergenerational bonds can be a bulwark against exploitation. Through the foundation, I also began mentoring young entrepreneurs, particularly those interested in creating businesses that served senior populations. Working with these energetic, innovative young people kept my mind sharp and gave me the opportunity to pass on the business wisdom I had accumulated over decades. As for Daniel and Tiffany, our relationship remained complicated and distant. The mandatory counseling revealed deeper issues in Daniel's psychology, patterns of entitlement and materialism that had roots in his childhood. While this provided some context for his actions, it did not excuse them. I attended several family therapy sessions with Daniel, hoping to understand how my parenting might have contributed to his moral failings. These sessions were painful but illuminating. I always felt like nothing I achieved was ever enough, Daniel admitted during one session. The business was your first priority, your real legacy. I was secondary. His words cut deep, forcing me to confront the possibility that my focus on providing materially for my family had come at the expense of emotional connection. Had I inadvertently taught Daniel that money and possessions were the measure of success and worth? These insights did not lead to a magical reconciliation. The breach of trust had been too severe, the harm too deliberate, but they did help me reach a place of personal peace, an understanding that forgiveness did not require forgetting or even reconciliation. Meanwhile, Emily continued to flourish. Her school counselor remarked on her unusual emotional intelligence and resilience. She has been through experiences that would break many adults, the counselor told me. Yet she maintains her compassion and optimism. That speaks volumes about her inner strength and about the stability you provide. Emily and I established new family traditions that honored Sarah's memory while creating our own unique bond. Every Sunday, we would make Sarah's special pancake recipe together. On her birthday, we would visit the botanical garden she had loved. These rituals gave Emily connection to the grandmother she had barely known and helped me keep Sarah's memory alive in positive ways. As months turned into a year, and then two, I watched Emily grow not just physically, but emotionally. The traumatized child, who had whispered warnings to me, had transformed into a confident, thoughtful teenager with a strong moral compass and a gift for seeing the best in people despite having witnessed the worst. One evening, as we sat on the porch swing Sarah and I had installed decades earlier, Emily asked me a question that revealed just how much she had processed her experiences. "Grandpa, do you think people can really change, like fundamentally change who they are?" I considered her question carefully, knowing she was thinking about her parents. "I believe people can change their behaviors and choices when they truly want to," I said finally. "But they have to want it for themselves, not just to please others or avoid consequences. The deeper the change needed, the harder the work required." She nodded thoughtfully. "I hope Dad and Mom can change. Not just to avoid trouble, but really change inside." Her capacity for hope in the face of profound betrayal moved me deeply. "That is a generous wish," I told her, "and it says more about your character than theirs." As Emily headed inside to finish her homework, I remained on the porch, reflecting on the unexpected journey of these past years. The fortune Daniel and Tiffany had schemed to steal remained intact, now secured in trusts, benefiting Emily's future and the foundation's work. But the true wealth in my life had nothing to do with money or possessions. The real fortune was this finding family in unexpected places, learning that dignity and self-worth cannot be taken without consent. Discovering that even after profound betrayal, life offers new beginnings, new connections, new purpose. Sarah had once told me during her final months, "The measure of a life well lived is not what you accumulated, but what you gave away, not who failed you, but who you forgave, not the battles you won, but how you fought them." In the aftermath of betrayal, I had found a path to living by these words. I had found, somewhat to my surprise, not just survival, but genuine joy and peace. And most precious of all, I had found that family. True family is defined not by blood, but by love, loyalty, and shared values. As I watched the sunset paint the sky in colors Sarah would have loved, I felt her presence not as a ghost or a supernatural visitation, but as the enduring influence of a life well lived. She would have been proud of Emily. She would have been proud of me too, I think, for finding the strength to stand up for myself and for creating something meaningful from painful circumstances. Has something similar happened in your family? Have you experienced betrayal from those who should have loved you most? I hope my story shows that even in the darkest moments, dignity and healing are possible. Please share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, consider subscribing to hear more stories of overcoming life's challenges. Remember, it is never too late to reclaim your worth and find your true family, whether related by blood or bound by something even stronger: respect, loyalty, and love. Thank you for listening, and may you find peace on your own journey of healing.